Hello there, adventurer. Welcome to the Crooked Cleric, Ansalon's premier place for a great ale and a fantastic tale. You've come to hear just such a tale, haven't you? Yes, I thought so. You have the look of a person who enjoys a good story. Well, as fate would have it, I have just such a story prepared. Have a seat, friend, and I shall regale you with the tale I call Dice-Cursed Player Curses the Table, Threatens Bodily Harm on the DM, Attempts to Steal an Expensive Mini, and is ejected from an event. I have been DMing for a very long time. As such, I have seen my unfair share of poor dice rolls, but for some people, this does appear to be the universe's way of telling them to reroll a character or get new dice. This happened roughly 4 years ago at Belfast Minicon, where I was asked to run my year-by-year ongoing narrative D&Disney themed game. It is a fun big table, up to 20 players a day, drop-in, drop-out type of game with pre-written simplified character sheets based on notable Disney franchise characters and represented by Disney Infinite models and oversized terrain with 3D printed, overscaled, models of various types. As I said, the game has been ongoing for years, with many players returning with the prior year's character sheets, so they can continue playing the same character in the narrative, and they tend to spend the vast majority of the con each year at my table. The story begins with two new players, an older gent and his slightly younger wife. As they arrived fairly early in the day, they had quite a few characters to pick from that had not been assigned to returning players, and they opted to play Venom from Marvel, a Hexblade Kulak, and Elsa from Frozen, a sorcerer, as they knew the characters well enough so RP wouldn't be an issue. After confirming that they had a basic grasp on D&D as a whole, and a quick briefing on the simplified combat system with what was at the time the latest version of what is now Hit Point Press's Player Combat Cheat Sheet for 5e, a wonderful resource for new players I highly recommend. I introduced them into play as captives in the bowels of the Black Pearl, under the less than perceptive eyes of its cursed crew. The drop-in party at the time, consisting of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Thor, Jack Sparrow, Stitch, Black Widow, and Anakin Skywalker, all of whom were returning players. The task was simple: steal the Black Pearl, rescue the prisoners, and get the ship as close to New York as possible, so they could get to Avengers Tower before other returning players turned up that had pre-booked quite a few of the Avengers lineup to play. As I said, this is a big, ongoing, RP-heavy game, and the minions of the Dark Master Walt Disney and his army of Ultron clones infected with demonic ink need to be stopped. At first, things went fairly well. The couple melded with the group as well as could be expected. The guy playing Venom really enjoyed my DM-based egging on to violence as the voice of the Venom symbiote during the combat phase, and Elsa reveled in a myriad of reflavored spells with an ice theme. And then, the dice turned against her. She went from relatively happy, bubbly, and upbeat to a screaming banshee of frustration and accusation as roll after roll came up as ones and twos on her borrowed dice, which happened to be mine. Demanding new dice, she attempted to take some of the recurring players' personal dice. I should point out that while I do sign out dice to drop-in players, I do encourage players to bring their own dice and roll trays so they don't get lost. Understandably, the recurring player was upset by this random new player that was screaming and throwing a fit while attempting to take her dice. This led to a tug-of-war between them, with each holding a side of the recurring player's custom leather dice tray, with Elsa and Jack Sparrow struggling for dominance over the very expensive gem dice. There was a tear, a fall, and soon after, a scattering of amethyst polyhedral rain as the die took to the air and scattered, the D6 lost to the ether, and the D4 and D20 getting chipped. Understandably, Jack lost her collective shit. Frankly, I don't blame her. I just gotta stop for a second, guys. I just want to make this very clear. You never, ever, ever reach for someone else's dice. Not without asking. Not unless they tell you you can. Because I'll tell you, you reach for my dice at the table, You're getting back a bloody stump. With the rolling tray ruined, dice damaged and or lost, and with most of the table attempting to find them, Elsa took it upon herself to reach over and again attempt to take another set of dice. As I said, I always have players sign for borrowed dice, but most players tend to bring their own. I demanded she stop what she was doing, and for my efforts got a handful of my own cursed dice tossed at me with a snide, "These are jinxed! Why would you give me jinxed dice?" I should point out that this player had chosen my sky blue set to borrow and signed for herself, the same way her husband had opted for my matte blacks. Once again, a scattering of die hit the floor, and my always helpful recurring players assisted in recovering them. It was at this point that they noticed she was moving another recurring player's dice to her dice tray, and she noticed that I had left my position at the head of the table. She was asked, politely, to return the dice and leave the table, and I attempted to remove the dice tray and dice along with the Elsa character sheet. She went nuts, started screaming that I was hurting her. I wasn't touching her at all. Advised that she was a witch herself, and that she was being oppressed and violated by me being in her personal aura, and that she was going to get security. I took a step back and told her to go right ahead. There were cameras in every play space for security, and that once they've seen her attempting to steal from and assault my players, that she would be escorted from the game space. My wonderful players stood as witnesses, and she was asked to leave. She then grabbed her poor hubby by the arm and started waving her hand and mumbling. Her husband sighed and told me that she was cursing me as he pulled on his coat, thanked me for the game, and attempted to move Elsa out of the room while she whined, spat, and pushed her husband to defend her, advising me that when I got out of the convention, that her brother, and the rest of her coven would be waiting. Thankfully, one of my players had the good sense to get security, who witnessed the last of her tirade and took her by the shoulder to escort her out. It took a few minutes for things to settle, and as I cleared the mess, I noticed that the Elsa Mini was gone. Had this been a normal D&D game, the loss of a mini is to be expected at a con, and is pretty much trivial. But these were Disney Infinity models, and as they were no longer in production or distribution, they can be a pain to replace. A quick call to the security team, and we found out that she was making a complaint regarding physical assault, apparently against not only me, but the security team as well. She was apparently asked to empty her pockets and bag, and the mini was found on her person, and soon returned by security and a very apologetic and clearly embarrassed husband, who clarified that no, there would be no physical repercussions from him or anyone else in regards to what happened. He told me that she had episodes like this at times, and that this was not the first time she had got too involved in a role and made similar threats. He even offered to pay for the damaged and lost dice. While I'm not 100% certain that he did or did not, he did leave his contact details with Jack, and she seemed happy enough to accept the apology at the time. The game carried on as normal from that point, but it was a hell of a weird way to start a long weekend of convention gaming. And that is the end of our story. Well, adventurer, did it quench your thirst for entertainment? I knew it would. Come back again soon and I will tell you another grand story. Don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out. Everyone helps. We'll see you next time.